Today we're going to dive into everything about Mother Teresa. Hope you enjoy. We like our saints to be born as statues, already carved from marble, already flawless, already cold. But before she was Mother Teresa, she was just Anjeza, a teenage girl from Skopje, born in 1910 into a comfortable Albanian family. She was fascinated by stories of missionaries, yes, but she was also just a daughter who wept bitterly when she left her mother at 18, knowing she would never see her again. And she didn't. She went to Ireland, joined the Sisters of Loreto, and took the name Teresa. Soon after, she was sent to Calcutta. For nearly 20 years, Teresa lived behind the high, protective brick walls of St. Mary's School. She taught geography to wealthy girls. She was safe. She was comfortable. She was deeply loved by her community, eventually becoming the school's principal. By all accounts, this was her life. A good life, a holy life. But Calcutta wasn't just the school. Outside those brick walls, the city was bleeding. The 1943 Bengal famine had left bodies piling up in the gutters. Religious violence was tearing the streets apart. Then came September 10th, 1946. It's a date that changes everything. Sister Teresa is on a train rolling through the night toward Darjeeling for her annual retreat. The carriage is crowded, the air is thick, and the tracks are rattling. And right there, amidst the noise, she hears it. Not an echo, not a vague feeling, but what she described as a literal, commanding voice. It wasn't a call to be a nun. She already was one. It was what she called a call within a call. The voice told her to leave the safety of the convent, to strip away her comfortable habit, and to go out into the slums. Not to teach the wealthy, but to live among the poorest of the poor, to die with them. Think about the sheer terror of that moment. She was a protected European nun being told to step into the absolute abyss of human misery with nothing in her pockets. She didn't want to go. She was terrified. But the voice gave her a phrase that would burn in her soul for the next 50 years. I thirst. The bureaucratic battle to leave the cloister, medical training in Patna, entering the slums alone, and the founding of the first home for the dying. If you think the Catholic Church just lets a nun walk out the front door because she heard a voice on a train, you don't know the Church. It took Teresa nearly 2 years of exhausting, bureaucratic agonizing to get permission. But in August 1948, she finally stepped outside the convent gates. She changed her heavy wool habit for a simple, cheap white cotton sari with 3 blue stripes, purchased from a local market. She had just a few months of basic medical training. She had no money, no companion, no guarantee of safety. Imagine her first day walking into the Moti Jheel slum. The heat is oppressive. The smell of open sewers is suffocating. She finds a patch of dirt under a tree and uses a stick to write the alphabet in the mud to teach the children. That was her first school. When her feet swelled from walking and she had to beg for food, temptation crept in. She wrote in her diary about wanting to run back to the convent. She missed the clean sheets, the quiet chapel, the security. She was profoundly lonely, but then she encountered the dying. In Calcutta at that time, if you were poor and sick, hospitals would literally turn you away, so you wouldn't take up a bed. People died on the pavement, their flesh being eaten by rats and ants while the city walked past. One day, Teresa found a woman lying in the street, half eaten by animals. She didn't just pray over her. She picked her up, carried her to a hospital, and refused to leave until they gave her a bed. The woman died a few hours later, but she died indoors, with a human being holding her hand. Teresa realized she couldn't do this from the streets. She begged the city authorities for a space, and they gave her an abandoned temple dedicated to the goddess Kali. She cleaned it out and named it Nirmal Hriday, the home of the pure heart, a place where the destitute could come for one specific reason: to die surrounded by love, looking into the eyes of a person who cared. The explosive growth of the Missionaries of Charity, the strictness of the order, and the pivot toward international fame. At first, people thought she was crazy. Local residents even threw stones at her, believing this foreign woman was trying to forcefully convert dying Hindus. But then they looked inside the temple. They saw her washing the wounds of untouchables. They saw her carrying the infected. Slowly, the anger turned to awe, and then the young women started coming. Her former students from the wealthy school began knocking on her door, begging to join her. In 1950, the Vatican officially recognized her new order, the Missionaries of Charity. Teresa didn't build an organization. She built an army, and she was a general. If you wanted to join her, you didn't just give up your money. You were allowed to own 3 saris, a pair of sandals, a bucket to wash your clothes, a small mattress, and a prayer book. That was it. No fans in the heat of summer. No typewriters. No modern comforts. She believed that to understand the poor, you had to live exactly like them. By the 1960s, the world started noticing. A British journalist named Malcolm Muggeridge made a documentary about her, and suddenly, Mother Teresa was a global icon. Money began pouring in from around the world. Cocooned in international fame, she began traveling. She opened houses in Venezuela, Rome, New York, and Africa. She didn't just care for the dying anymore. She was opening orphanages, leper colonies, and AIDS hospices when the rest of the world was treating AIDS patients like modern-day lepers. But as the spotlight grew brighter, something fascinating happened. Mother Teresa became a paradox. She was this tiny, frail woman who could command the attention of presidents, popes, and kings. Yet she would return to Calcutta and personally clean toilets. She was globally famous, yet she remained completely untouchable by the luxury around her. Winning the Nobel Peace Prize, her polarizing stance on social issues, and growing criticism of her medical facilities. In 1979, Mother Teresa was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. When she arrived in Oslo, she looked completely out of place among the glittering elite. She refused the traditional lavish banquet, asking that the $7,000 cost be sent directly to the poor in Calcutta instead. She famously said, "I think it is very beautiful that the poor can accept the Nobel Prize through me." But this is where her story becomes incredibly complex. With immense fame came immense scrutiny. To the Western world, she was a plaster saint. But to critics, she was becoming a highly polarizing figure. Journalists and medical professionals began visiting her clinics in Calcutta and were shocked by what they found. They saw volunteers with no medical training reusing needles, patients with curable diseases mixed with the dying, and a complete lack of modern painkillers. The criticism was brutal. People argued that with the millions of dollars flowing into her accounts, she should have built state-of-the-art hospitals. Critics accused her of glorifying suffering rather than curing it. They pointed out her fierce, unyielding stances against abortion and contraception, arguing she was more interested in a theological crusade than systemic social change. How did she respond? She didn't engage in debates. She didn't defend her medical practices to the media, because in her mind, people fundamentally misunderstood her work. She would look at the critics and say, "We are not nurses, we are not doctors, we are not social workers. We are religious sisters. We do this for Jesus." To Teresa, her homes were not hospitals. They were tabernacles. The goal wasn't just to prolong life, but to save the soul from the agonizing feeling of being unwanted. But while she fought to make others feel wanted, behind her own eyes, a terrifying psychological tragedy was unfolding. The shocking revelation of her private letters, her 50-year spiritual desert, her death, and what her doubt teaches us about her true strength. Mother Teresa died on September 15, 1997. India gave her a massive state funeral, the same honor given to emperors and presidents. Her body was carried through the streets on the same gun carriage that held Mahatma Gandhi. The world wept for the woman who had spent 50 years radiating the absolute certainty of God's love, but the real shockwave hit a decade later. In 2007, her private letters to her spiritual directors were published, and what they revealed stunned the world. For nearly 50 years, from the moment she stepped into the slums of Calcutta until the day she died, Mother Teresa lived in absolute spiritual darkness. The voice she heard on the train in 1946, it went completely silent. She wrote that she felt no presence of God, no faith, no warmth. Listen to her own words written in the dark. "The place of God in my soul is blank. There is no God in me. When the pain of longing is so great, I just long and long for God. And then it is that I feel He does not want me. He is not there. Think about the psychological weight of that. The woman who was comforting the dying by telling them God loved them was going home to her room, kneeling in the dark, and feeling entirely abandoned by the universe. Some critics use these letters to call her a hypocrite. But if you look closer, it reveals something infinitely more profound. If Mother Teresa had felt God's presence every day, her work would have been easy. Her sacrifice would have been fueled by divine ecstasy, but she didn't. Her true strength wasn't that she felt holy. It was that she kept waking up at 4:30 a.m. every single morning, picking up the dying and cleaning wounds despite feeling completely empty inside. She turned her own spiritual starvation into a tool to understand the physical starvation of the gutters. She lived out her phrase, "I thirst," not as a slogan, but as her reality. Mother Teresa was not a statue. She was a flawed, complex, fiercely stubborn human being who chose to stand in the darkest places of the earth and hold a light, even when she herself couldn't see the flame. That's all from Mango. Thanks for watching. Bye!